Welcome, welcome everyone. We'll get started in about a couple seconds. Once I see that the participant list starts to slow down. Welcome, welcome everyone. We'll get started in a couple of seconds. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Alejandra Chamberlain, and you are here for the Expanded Learning and Summer Programs for McKinney-Vento students. Again, welcome from the California Homeless Education Technical Assistance Center. As I mentioned, I'm Alejandra Chamberlain. I'm one of the three Hetac leads. The other two are Jennifer from Los Angeles County Office of Ed and Susan from San Diego County Office of Ed. And we have the pleasure of bringing you this webinar via the Hetac. And I want to now introduce you to Denise.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Denise Clark with the Contra Costa County Office of Education, also supporting the Hetac, or Homeless Education Technical Assistance Center for our region. A few webinar logistics for today. Again, you are here for the Expand program and summer programs for McKinney-Vento or Homeless Education, and some webinar logistics. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted within approximately 1 week on the Hetac website, which is at hetac.org. A copy of the presentation slides and resources will also be sent to anybody who registered for this webinar today. All attendees are currently muted. We will have the Q&A feature open as well as the chat if you would like to submit questions, and we hope to have a few minutes at the end of the presentation to answer those questions. A brief overview of today's agenda. Again, we'll be providing an overview of expanded learning and summer programs and how to access those for our McKinney-Vento students. We'll review some barriers to program access for those students, discuss extended year programming under McKinney-Vento, American Rescue Plan funds, and the ARP funds, share some information on other extended learning programs in California, and review how to locate programs in your community and discuss strategies for supporting program access for your McKinney-Vento students. Before I jump right into the after-school programs, I just want to briefly mention that we are grateful to have two other presenters with us today. Joining us are Akila Bird from Alameda County Office of Education. She's the Director of Region 4 Expanded Learning Programs, and she will be presenting a portion of this training on the expanded learning programs, as well as Iqbal Waltz, Education Administrator, Expanding Learning Division from the California Department of Education. So a couple slides down, they're going to be presenting the ELO, or the after-school extended learning programs in California, and they'll provide some very great details on that expansion for you in just a few slides. So before we get to that section, just wanted to provide a little context and some data around after-school programs in California. California is one of the states, one of 10 states that is nationally recognized as having an expansive after-school program. And while we do have a great many programs in California and quite a vast and extensive system of after-school programs, when there are 1.1 million children taking part in those, there is still a huge unmet need of nearly 3.1 million children that would still need to be enrolled in programs if they were available. And so you'll see here just some data from the After School Alliance. For every one child in an after-school program in California, there are approximately 3 more waiting to get in. And you'll also see that about 56% of children surveyed in 2020 would attend an after-school program if one were available to them. So again, just showing that while California is doing a wonderful job of providing these programs across our state, there is still a high need that is not being met. And so it would be great to expand these programs and to make sure our McKinney-Vento students are having access to these programs. A little more data here, specific to families trying to access or enrolling students in these programs. Some of the challenges they face are basically that it's too expensive. There are also not enough programs available, which I just touched on briefly. And actually, since 2014, the participation in these programs had decreased. We know with some of the COVID funding, the relief funding, and some of the expansion of the expanded learning programs, that data we hope will be changing and going back up shortly. But this gives you a sense of just how many families face challenges to enroll their children in these programs. And that's not specific to our McKinney-Vento families, but we know those families are even more challenged to access these programs. And so making them more available is definitely something we want to focus on and make sure our families and students have that information on how to access these programs. And so this will come as probably no shock to anybody, but there are great positive benefits to students attending these after school and summer programs. Research indicates that high quality after school programs and other expanded learning programs provide great academic and developmentally enriching services. They have many positive impacts on a wide range of student outcomes. The first and primary one that's always reported on is school attendance. There's great increases in student attendance and academic motivation. Academic work habits, completing their homework, English language development, academic achievement. We see increases in student grades and test scores. Of course, there's a high level of social emotional development, behavior, and discipline that are impacted by involvement in after-school programs. And for our homeless children or families and experiencing homelessness, additional positive benefits can be safety of attending a program after school and having a safe place to go, connectedness with staff and other caring adults and children, building adult caring relationships, and additional participatory opportunities that they might not get during the regular school day. And so these are all benefits of high quality after school programs. And I'll just briefly provide a little bit of data on summer programming in our state. Basically, it is there is a great need, but there is a high demand still that has not been met. And so while there are 1.4 million children that were in programs, there are still there's 21%, sorry, in the structured summer learning experience in 2019, and 21% is still pretty low comparatively. And so looking at the data again and wanting to make sure that there are programs available and that they have access. There are about 52% of families that reported one child was in a summer learning program. But again, still that is not meeting the need of children that would like to participate if given the opportunity. If we look at participation by grade level, children in a summer experience by grade level, you see that the middle school, grades 6 through 8, are the highest level of participants in those programs. Our K through 5th graders are the lowest, and our high schoolers are next there at 22%. And then if you look at the breakdown by the average time spent in programs and the type of programs, voluntary summer programs, about a little under 4 weeks of participation, about 6 hours a day. And then of course, typically what we know during summer specialty camps, summer camps or programs, those are about 3.4 weeks long and about 3.9 hours per day. So there are varying degrees of summer programs available, but access is going to, again, depend on availability, the age of child that they can serve in those programs, cost, and some other factors as well. And we'll go into that a little bit as we continue on. These are the top locations of voluntary and specialty programs. And so this again is all from the After School Alliance. And so the top 5 locations for voluntary summer program are your community-based organizations locally in your towns or cities or counties, city or town programs. And so that could be your summer city recreation programs, public or private school, childcare centers, and library programs. Those are all voluntary, of course. And then specialty programs, other programs that these are usually paid programs in public or private school. Again, it could be a city or town facility. a museum or science center or a religious organization. And so that would be more of your typical summer camp programs that are a little bit longer in duration and generally have a cost associated with them. And so just by a brief review of the data, you can see that while there are many options available to children and families, it varies greatly as far as their accessibility. The unmet demand for summer programs is very high. 31% that are currently not in a summer program would be enrolled if the one were available to them. The unmet demand by grade level, again, it switches a little here. We have our K through 5th graders are actually the high need that we need to provide some more opportunities for. Our 6th through 8th graders, again, are next, and then our high schoolers, which can access different programs because some of those 9th through 12th graders might be doing internships or summer work programs. And so, again, they're not necessarily accessing these programs, but they might be doing some other programs as well. And this will be no surprise, but that some of the barriers reported by parents, of course, include cost and access. And that really will impact their ability to have their children access these programs. Programs can be expensive. 42% reported that they're just too expensive and they're not able to participate in those programs. Location and transportation issues, which those, if you're a homeless student, those are definitely issues to getting your child enrolled and participating in a program. And then again, we mentioned just the sheer availability of these programs. As a parent myself, I know our after school programs are highly impacted at our school district, and there's waiting lists and you have to jump on those spaces early. So again, for our McKinney-Vento families, that's not always going to be something that they're able to get into, surely because of the need and the available slots. But we do know these programs are very important, and so we do want to try to increase those numbers. And so what are the most common barriers to McKinney-Vento students being able to access these programs we talked about earlier? Of course, lack of awareness about available programs or how to access them. I think that's the biggest factor generally, and we'll talk about some of that on our call today. Just to jump back for a moment, just some additional data from the 2018-2019 academic year. Expanded learning programs, while they served many, many students, primarily the students that were served were the socioeconomically disadvantaged, students of color, and English learners. There was only about 5% of students who were recognized as homeless or McKinney-Vento students. So 5% of the total served is still a pretty low percentage. So we do want to make sure that we're increasing that access for our families and making them aware of these available opportunities at their schools and communities. Again, we've mentioned several times lack of program capacity, lack of transportation, lack of clothing, limited program hours, and cost is always going to be a family or an issue for our McKinney-Vento families. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Alejandra, who's going to share a little bit more information specific to our homeless students.
So most of you are liaisons, most likely are working for a district or a COE and have been thinking about how do we could support our students who are identifying as McKinney-Vento when it comes to expanded extended learning, and how do we fund it. So these are 3 funding sources that you can look into. Of course, keeping in mind that they have a different allowable activities, as well as who is really administering these fundings. We will go into detail, so this one is just an overview. The Education for Homeless Children and Youth, EHCY, Title I, Part A, and then, of course, the American Rescue Plan, ARP, Homeless Children and Youth Funds. Next slide. So when you think about EHCY, and if you are the liaison who has the opportunity to carry out this work, there are 16 allowable activities. And in particular, we called out the allowable activity that speaks to before and after school, mentoring, summer programs. And we also have the link there so that if you need to refer to it back, when you're really advocating for your students and ensuring that there's funding source that will allow them to participate in these activities. Do keep in mind these slides will be provided afterwards, so all of the information that you see here you will have at your hands. When thinking about, in particular, EHCY, often a go-to is tutoring. And so next slide, I speak to some of the work that we've done within Contra Costa County. And that is to hire tutors who are then dedicated to support effort countywide within all of our districts. In our county, we have 18 districts. And so as the County Office of Ed, we hired 3 tutors because that is regionally how many regions we have in our county, and then collaborate closely with the district McKinney-Vento liaison or homeless liaison or family and transition liaison, depending on how you title that position. And that process has been really looking at how do we intentionally prioritize McKinney-Vento students and making sure that they get tutoring one-on-one and then multi-funded if needed so that it's sustainable. The tutors that we have in-house are full-time tutors with benefits, and I highlight that because I've had tutors who are part-time, and we often see a turnover that's much quicker, and unfortunately then that has an impact in the relationship building and rapport building with the students and their willingness to participate and engage, because our students, our McKinney-Vento students, tend to not have the most stable housing, so that also may affect their schooling. So we want to make sure that that person is consistent and we won't have a lot of turnover. With that in mind, then the collaboration with the district really meant coordinating with the liaison if they appointed a counselor in particular to a school site, and then prioritizing the McKinney-Vento students. The district that we worked with had a process in and of themselves in regards to connecting with each student, doing a interview. I believe they called it something else. I apologize for not remembering off the top, but they had one-on-ones, really made sure that whoever they were prioritizing for these limited spots it was intentional. And then the COE, so the County Office of Ed, as well as the district, meet on a monthly basis. We make sure that issues are being addressed. If students are not showing up, what can we do? Triaging issues, as well as just making sure that the tutor is aware of anything that we may not be aware of as the COE, and that the school district might have, that we want to make sure everyone's in communication. We also are tracking and notifying when there's missed sessions so that we can do home visits or bring in another partnering agency to make sure that the student is really getting the most out of it. This same tutoring program will extend into the summer and beyond, and our hope is to keep it going with the intention of obviously keeping in mind of improving grades and overall support, and then communication and everyone being mindful of the need that the student has. Next slide. So that's one example of how we could be intentional about our EHCY, acknowledging that that is a small pocket of money. I'm not going to disregard that. So that is where the multi-funding approach is important. With regards to the summer programming, here are 2 citations that we would want you to be aware of where it speaks to that allowable component. So as an LEA, when you're looking at, how do I advocate for students? How do I make sure that they are kept at the core of these services and advocating? So that's there in regards to summer's program as well. So it gives you a little bit more language. Next slide. Title I, another funding source. The example that I gave around tutoring and EHCY being one of the funding source, Title I is another funding source that would allow you to braid together different funding source to keep it sustainable. And in regards to Title I, The information around what is allowable, what is not allowable, in particular to bullet number 3, extended learning time, and really around supporting students with homework and whether they're at a shelter or not a shelter. So that gives you that flexibility of whether that's a services you provide within your school structure, similar to the tutor that is going into the district that I gave an example of, or whether you have a tutor or other services that are being provided and collaborated with a shelter nearby your school site. Next slide. And now we have ARP funding, so that also adds another layer. So with that in mind, they all overlap in some way or another to really be intentional about supporting summer learning, extended learning, expanded learning. So all with the intention of looking at our most vulnerable students and looking at the funding sources and braiding them together and giving students, like Denise mentioned, there isn't enough. And so having to be strategic about your funding sources and then carving out and working with your networks to be mindful around how to support McKinney-Vento students. It's not easy. I'm not going to give you this idea that it's going to be easy. However, there are enough out there funding sources so that, you know, when you start thinking about if you take a little portion from here and a little portion from there, then it could allow for more opportunities for our students. With that in mind, next slide. So ARP in particular around engagement activities, funds can be used for engagement and re-engagement activities of students due to the impact of COVID. Obviously, that also includes the tutoring, the mentoring, the summer programs. It gives you a list of all those different activities. So more information for you to have so that you can continue to advocate and get creative and hopefully spark some ideas around how you can create opportunities for your McKinney-Vento students. Next slide. So with this overview, and that is where I stop. Forgive me, I was getting excited and I was like, wait, this is not my slide. I get to hand it over to Akila and
Iqbal.
your group. Iqbal, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandro Chamberlain. And I'm Iqbal Bedwals. I'm an education administrator with the Expanded Learning Division at the California Department of Education. And I'm going to be discussing these various funding sources that we have. The 3 funding sources that you see on the slide, they are ongoing funding. And let me start with the very first one, 21st Century Community Learning Centers. This is a federally funded grants that federally funded program that we release in competitive grants that prioritizes high poverty schools. And the eligible recipients are LEAs, which is local educational organizations, agencies, community-based organizations, other public and private entities and institutions of higher education. For summer learning, they can apply for additional funds for summer, and the funds are available for TK through grade 12. McKinney-Vento students must be prioritized for program access, and programs that charge fees must waive them for homeless students. So that's that's stated in law and very important. Going on to the next funding is after school education and safety funding, also called ACES. This is state funded program. And again, the funding is distributed based on competitive grant that prioritizes high poverty schools. And public schools or CBOs that partner with a public school LEA can apply for this. When we say public school, we also include charter schools as public schools. They can apply for additional funds for summer and also available for TK through grade 8. And once again, McKinney-Vento students must be prioritized for these program access, and any program that charges fees must waive these for homeless students. And more recently added, new to the whole ball game, is Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. This was added in 21-22, and it's a state-funded $4 billion program, and it's a formula allocation instead of being a competitive grant. LEAs that receive funds for classroom-based instructional programs that serve TK through 6, and the LEA does not have the option to decline funds. The LEAs must provide non-school day programming for at least 30 days, in addition, 30 days, 9 hours a day, in addition to 180 regular school days. This particular funding prioritizes TK through 6 with option to extend to higher grade levels. Once again, McKinney-Vento students must be prioritized for program access, and any program that charges fees must waive them for homeless students. Next, please. I also want to add that in addition to those funding, there are one-time fundings also federally and state funded ELO grant fund as well as ESSER funding, but we are discussing at this point of time the ongoing funding. So what's a specialty and the key points? The enrollment priority, first priority must be given to pupils who are identified by the program as homeless youth or as being in foster care. And we have a education code citation stated right there. If the program is at the full capacity, the current program participants need not be removed to make room for new homeless or foster youth. However, new homeless and foster youth should be placed on top of the waiting list. Another key point is that the program, the law does not require that the law requires the student to self-certify as a homeless student, and does not require program to verify from another resource. Program administrators shall allow the pupil himself, herself to certify as being a homeless or in foster care, or may also obtain information from the school district's homeless youth liaison if the school district has a waiver on file allowing for the release of this information. Once again, fees must be waived for pupils identified as homeless, foster care, as well as eligible for free and reduced price meals for summer as well as supplemental program. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Akila Bird.
Thank you, Iqbal. So what does expanded learning mean? So expanded learning actually means before school, after school, summer or intersession learning programs. There's a focus on developing the academic, social, emotional, and physical needs and interests of our pupils through hands-on and engaging learning experiences. And in the most recent legislation, intersession is now simply replaced with the term non-school day. So you'll hear me refer to that as well. And it makes it easy for us to recognize that expanded learning can actually take place outside of the school days, outside of summer break. It can happen any day of the week, as well as any month of the year. So in reference to the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, which is also known as the ELO program, the intent is to provide all of our TK through 6th grade unduplicated students across the state access to 9 hours of expanded learning opportunities on every single school day, as well as the 30 non-school days. If you're an LEA that has 75% or above unduplicated pupil percentages, then you must actually offer and provide access to all of your TK through 6th grade students, but you're also funded at a higher rate in order to do so. The funding is, again, formula-based, so it's not a competitive grant, and all of our LEAs are receiving this, and it's based on their UPP. So since LEAs are not required to actually host an ELO program at every single school site, as it is indeed a local decision, however, they should definitely be prioritizing programs at school sites that are in the lowest income communities while maximizing the number of schools and neighborhoods with programs that are offered. I also want to share that Ed Code calls for transportation to be provided for any pupil who attends a school that is not operating an ELO program, so they can attend at a location that is offering one, and also for them to return to either their original location or another location that's established by the LEA. And you can find more about that at the CDE website with the ELO program FAQs. That is number 19 in reference to transportation. And as with any other school-based program, fees cannot be charged to our homeless youth, foster youth, or students eligible for free or reduced price meals. However, every student is indeed eligible to participate in the program, regardless of fees. Next slide, please. And now we really wanted to take a moment and uplift some of our ELO program highlights so that everyone understands the significance of the program and how it may be leveraged for our most vulnerable youth. So expanded learning opportunities does not mean an extension of instructional time. It's not a replica of the school day and what hasn't worked during school hours, but rather it's an opportunity for us to engage pupils in enrichment, play, nutrition, and other developmentally appropriate activities. So what you see happening in a TK expanded learning program would not mirror what we have our sixth graders also doing in expanded learning programs. And again, it includes an educational and literacy element in which, of course, tutoring or homework assistance can be provided, but it also must include an educational enrichment element. And this is very important. Some examples are also there of fine arts, CTE, recreation, physical play, and prevention activities. This should be done in collaboration with our community-based organizations and childcare providers. Attendance is based on the individual needs of the students and the family. So this is really a flexible opportunity for our homeless students since there's no attendance requirement or component of the program. And again, the priority needs to be for our lowest income communities. Also, ELO program funds can be used to cover the costs associated with meals that are provided during these enrichment activities. And this is something to really take note of because programs may not be offered at all school sites, especially, non-Title I schools. So this is an opportunity to leverage that if we have certain sites that already don't have access to free meals outside of the regular school day. You can use your ELO program funding to cover the cost of the meals as well. Next slide, please. And on this slide, we wanted to include some resources for locating expanded learning programs. And in recognizing that this is a statewide webinar, what we're asking is for you to contact your LEA's director of expanded learning or whoever oversees expanded learning programs within that particular LEA or district. And they will be able to connect you to the programs that they are hosting or either partnering with. You can also reach out to on the CDE website and see where we have the ACES and 21st funding recipient list to see who's the grantees of the program. And there's also access for you to look at the ELO program entitlements, which is sorted by our LEAs throughout the state of California. And of course, as for myself, I am a system of support for expanded learning lead, and I see a lot of some of my colleagues throughout the state on this call. So you can also reach out to your county system of support for expanded learning. And though we don't know where all programs are hosted, we can definitely place you in contact with the LEAs, throughout your region who can help to support you further. And now I would like to pass it back to Denise.
Thank you, Akila and Iqbal, for that wonderful information. I think there's a lot of diverse opportunities here, and it's really important that our liaisons have this information so they know where to go and see if those programs exist within their LEAs. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And next, I'm going to jump in. So other than ACES and 21st Century Learning 21st Century Learning Centers and ELOP, what other summer programs are available in your area? So this is summer and after school, depending on your programs. But we know locally, we have a lot of YMCA centers. Some boys and girls clubs are also great opportunities for our families, community-based organizations. Again, I mentioned city parks and recreations, libraries, and faith-based organizations. And the reason we bring these up is because obviously we know there's not enough services for our families. And a lot of these programs listed here on the site have scholarships, sliding scales, fee waivers, what have you. And so we want to make sure as the liaison, you're aware of these programs within your own local community, and you're able to help connect your families to those services that might, they're not being met at the school site or something's not available. We have other options that we can help refer them to. On here, I just posted a sample of the YMCA scholarships. A lot of these, again, very affordable programs. And also right now, while we have ARP funding, that it could be an allowable expense. You'd want to check, obviously, what your budget is and things that have been approved to spend that budget on. But those are options if it's not being provided for or available within the LEA system. Those are other options you might want to look at for your families and students. And then partnering with summer programs. So it's really important, I can't stress this enough, as the LEA liaison, that you provide training on supporting McKinney-Vento students to expanded learning program staff. So again, cross collaboration, making sure you're connecting with that person within your own LEA, let them know who you are, cross train each other, find out what's available within your LEA so that we can make sure those connections are happening within the COE and LEA levels. And then, work to prioritize slots for McKinney-Vento. We heard that in these programs, McKinney-Vento students and foster students are prioritized and have fee waivers. But again, if that cross communication is not happening and our families aren't becoming aware of these programs or timelines to sign up for various things, that's how they fall through the cracks and won't be able to participate in some of these wonderful programs that are being offered. And so, beyond that too, you want to maybe reach out to your local community agencies. As I mentioned, YMCA, after school programs, Boys and Girls Clubs, even the local city Parks and Rec departments. Reach out to them, introduce yourself, share your contact information, and see if you can get a cross referral program going. Again, this is the time of year to start that, because in April, I will tell you that a lot of the Parks and Rec departments will have their summer opportunity guides coming out, and those slots fill up fast. I can speak from experience. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and in April, we have it on the calendar. The rec guide comes out, we get signed up right away. But they do have scholarships for families. And so that's the time we want to make you aware of these opportunities now, so that families can make sure to jump on that opportunity, get their scholarship spot if it's available, and then get set up for summer before we get too close to summer. And so again, just as a liaison, whether you're a school site liaison, county office education liaison, or LEA liaison, just learn about what's available in your region that you can connect families to. I think that's a huge part, is just being the person that gets all that information and maybe gathers it in a centralized location via a newsletter, or when you're in contact with families. Now is the time to start looking at those summer opportunities. We know that summer is just around the corner. And so again, making sure that you find a way to become aware of those opportunities and connect your McKinney-Vento students to those at the forefront. One of those programs that we have in our county here is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, and I'm not going to go too far into that. I'm going to let Alejandra, because she is well versed in WIOA, and so I'll let her speak about that in just a moment. But another opportunity in many areas are summer internships for students. We have BART here in our backyard, so Bay Area Regional Transit, and they do summer internships. But again, this is the time that information starts to come out, and so you want to make sure you're connecting with those programs. A lot of local businesses have different programs for internships, some paid, some not paid, but those for our high school students particularly, those are going to be great opportunities for them. Look at your local community colleges for summer programs for youth. I'll share a little bit about what our programs do here locally. But I know some of the California State University programs have summer reading programs for K through 5th graders. That is a great program to hook your students up with. There's also Teen Life's California Summer Program Search. So there's 2 websites here we'll provide that you can search for programs in your area. Some of those do charge fees, but again, based on family need, a lot of scholarships are available. And so again, just know what's available locally within your city and your county, that you can kind of do a little cheat sheet for your families and provide that information this time of year, so they know what opportunities might be available come summertime, and get them signed up early. And so this I mentioned just briefly. This is our community college, our local community college, Diablo Valley College, that does what's called summer college for kids. And so this is actually last year, but in April, you'll see April 25th, actually they start posting information in April. So I'm waiting for this coming year's information. And as of last year, they did offer scholarships. If families had an EBT card, they qualified. And of course, last year, if it was free and reduced lunch from their district, they could qualify under that. We know that free and reduced lunch or free lunch is available now across the board in California, which is wonderful. And so the eligibility might change a little bit there. But now, again, April is the time to start this process. We've referred several families and had paid for a couple of students with EHCY or Education for Homeless Children and Youth money previously when summer school was not an option at their LEA. And so if they didn't qualify for summer school that summer, but they needed assistance in math or some of the STEAM areas, we were able to help students with transportation costs to get, if it was offered. This is in our central county, so we would provide bus or gas cards for students to get to those programs during summer, and then oftentimes get their fees waived for the scholarship. So again, it's partnering and making sure those needs are met for your families. Make sure they're connected to get the scholarship, and then maybe help offset the transportation cost with your McKinney-Vento funding if you have that available. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities available. It's just knowing about them and getting them connected at the right time. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Alejandra. She's well-versed in WIOA and will share a lot of information on WIOA and possibly some of the other programs we worked with here in our county.
Thank you, Denise. So Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, is a Department of Labor funding that comes through to each county. All of our 58 counties have Department of Labor money that is titled under WIOA, in particular Youth WIOA. So every one of you should be able to locate a WIOA within your county. And the programs are really set up to support youth in school and out of school, ages 16 to 24, and that happens to be locally. So it might be 14 to 24 in your county, but ultimately most of the workforce development boards, which are who actually run the programs or procure it out, decide that age range, but most likely 16 to 24. And it is for eligible youth to gain paid work experience, as well as get assistance with transportation, clothing, and anything that they would need to be successful on the job. And how they are potentially eligible is not only the age, but also on the flyer that you can see locally that we have. One of the criteria is McKinney-Vento eligible. As the liaison, you would be able to certify that they are McKinney-Vento identified, and you would be able to provide that to the agency providing this service, whether it's a community-based organization or whether it's the county entity providing this service. In addition to the work experience and what comes from that, they also have a case manager who then provides assistance with job placement after the work experience, checks in on attendance and grades, and makes sure kids are getting to school. And if there's issues or concerns or barriers that are getting in the way of them getting to school and staying in school, that's also supported through the case manager. Particular in our county, we have the pleasure of working with 2 of our districts where our case managers are co-located within the school districts. That's a long-standing collaboration that took a really long time, but I really encourage all of you to look into it. They're co-located in the school districts, and they're particularly focused on supporting McKinney-Vento students, and then really just ensuring that all of the services and supports that could be considered when supporting a McKinney-Vento student, it is. So whether it's getting you an alarm clock so you wake up every morning, or getting you bus tickets, or just making sure we're looking to see if you're eligible for partial credits or graduation exemption. All of that is part of that case management. So highly encourage you to look into it. And also a really great segue to start that collaboration by looking at just the summer program. Often youth are really excited about the summer and want to gain experience. And so this is a time where most of the WIOA providers are looking for youth and looking to enroll them and provide services. So If you have any questions further, I'm happy to provide more information down the road in regards to collaborating and leveraging WIOA funds for McKinney-Vento students. Next slide.
And briefly, before I advance, and I didn't include a slide on this, did you want to comment on DOR briefly?
Oh, yes,
For
absolutely.
students with IEPs, that might be another
Yes.
option.
Another option, thank you, Denise, is Department of Rehabilitation. So there are many programs that, again, are intended to support students. In particular, in our county, we have made a commitment to support our McKinney-Vento students as well as our foster youth. And so Department of Rehabilitation has the TPP program as well as We Can Work. And we're currently piloting a program called STEPS, which is targeting and being mindful around summer internships, but in particular for McKinney-Vento students who have an IEP or a 504. So again, another entity who's looking and seeking to collaborate with LEAs. It's just a matter of finding out who's your Department of Rehabilitation administrator in your county, and then speaking to the interest of collaborating and supporting students. And they serve 16 to 21 with the intention of being mindful around students with an IEP and being enrolled in an LEA, and when that support ends based on the definition of the LEA. Looking at my notes, making sure I didn't miss anything on the workforce side. I think one thing to keep in mind is that you also can be intentional about working with Department of Rehabilitation and the WDB for WIOA so that you can prioritize spots. The WIOA program is intended for foster, homeless, justice involved, pregnant parenting, IEPs, low income. Ultimately, if the provider knows who is supporting this work, meaning like an LEA, then they're happy to, in my experience, to really dedicate spots to be intentional and mindful around prioritizing McKinney-Vento students, not only on the WDB side, so the WIOA, but also Department of Rehabilitation. It's just a matter of that initial collaboration and being on the same page. Next slide. So summer food support, this is a big one. Obviously, as you're thinking about your EHCY and your ARP and your Title I and your ELO and all your providers, food is important. So thinking and being mindful around engaging of students and then making sure they have a meal, as well as connecting them to them if they're even or not supported by any provider. This is another summer program, summer intentional activity to connect families and to be mindful of where they're at, and making sure families have this information before it becomes June 1st and things get a little busier for everyone. With that in mind, lunch at the library is something that we've kicked off here in Contra Costa, and I'm sure they have them in other programs. A little reminder to connect with your library and see what they're offering. How are they providing support to children and youth in regards to free summer meals? Is there a way that you could collaborate if it's not happening, and looking at an example of what we're doing, and I'm sure others are not, or are, but ultimately making sure families are aware of this information. Next slide. And so how do you do all that, right? It's overwhelming as a liaison. I totally am not trying to give you another task to do on top of everything else you already do, but acknowledging that if we don't get the information out to our families, they won't know. The simple example of what Denise had mentioned, that as moms, we know that certain waiting lists are going to happen if we don't get our kids in on time for the city recreational activities or your community-based organization or whatever the case is. And so when families are busy just trying to find a place to stay and recreational activities are probably not on the radar. And so anything that we could do as that liaison to support them, I'm sure that they would appreciate it. So putting together a flyer with information about the summer programs, about meal programs, partners, deadlines in regards to your city recreational activities. We highly encourage it. This was a flyer that Denise put together for locally our work, and we are happy to share that template, and you all could use it and make sure that that information is communicated with your families. I think at the end of the day, it's really being intentional about communicating and sharing of information and prioritizing so that our McKinney-Vento students are considered, and that not having to advocate on their behalf when it's June and all the slots have been filled. Next slide.
Before we move on to questions, I'll just briefly add, just want to reflect back to what Alejandra mentioned earlier about braiding of funding and leveraging funding, because as we mentioned, some of these programs are free or low cost. But again, our families, they need to know about them. They need to access them and maybe get a scholarship. And then we need to find out, do they need transportation? Do they need supplies for that program? And look back at your 16 allowable expenditures under the EHCY funds. If you're an EHCY funded LEA, look at your ARP allowable expensive, but those are kind of the known funding sources for McKinney-Vento. And then, depending on your capacity, again, if you have the ability to directly connect folks with these, but at a minimum, if you're able to get a flyer together, this is a very younger youth facing flyer. Obviously, it's some younger youth programs, but then we have our WIOA programs and some of those workforce or internship programs for our older students. So cater it to your age groups. Just being that conduit of information is going to be very helpful at any level to our families, and getting the information out now in the next month and a half to make sure that they're well aware, knowing that they have so many things going on and they are moving around. So if you're able to do countywide information, depending on how mobile your families are that you're working with, or just within your own city or your LEA, just to let them know, hey, this is what's available summer school at your LEA. Beyond that, these are the other things in our city or county that you might have access to. So again, just sharing the information and connecting families is huge, and making sure they have what they need to access these programs.
Yes, and with that in mind, a little reminder that yes, many of our McKinney-Vento families, we want them to know that many of the programs will waive the program fees. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're sharing and providing that information. With regards to questions, we have a question in the chat. We are thinking of offering grant scholarships to our wait-listed students to participate in our after-school programs. Do we need to offer transportation and/or meals for those? If so, how does this look logistically?
So thank you, Alejandra. I want to lift up our county leads from the System of Support for Expanded Learning, because some of these questions may be very nuanced. But in general, the response I want to give is the intent of the ELO program is for TK through grade 6. So I know there's a question about qualifying, would a city bus pass qualify, or should we provide a meal, or if we give a scholarship, do we have to also then provide the transportation? If we think about what a transitional kindergartner needs, similar to how we think about field trips, we provide transportation. We also have chaperones. We don't send them on a bus alone. If we're giving a bus pass, we do know some of our families, including homeless families, that the parent is also going to need to ride with them as well when we're putting those type of things in place. So just to be mindful of that, because though it wasn't named in the FAQ, it is an assumption of safe transportation, the same that we would do for a school field trip. We would safely transport students. But I do want to say, please connect with your SSEL leads to kind of work through that. But yes, you can give grant scholarships. That is definitely an option for you to do that to some other city-based opportunity, but they should have access to some type of, snack that meets the guideline of the nutrition as well as they should safely be able to get there.
Thank you, Akila. I also think it's important to be creative, right? This is an opportunity where you could look at the ELO money, you could also look at your EHCY, you could look at the ARP, you could look at Title I, and get creative around, what does that look like for transportation, for meals, and like a bus pass. Yes, acknowledging if they're a little older youth and they could ride the bus and they would normally ride the bus if they were getting to school, then absolutely a bus pass could be the way you provide that transportation. But like any of our McKinney-Vento students, when we're looking at transportation, whether it's school of origin or a field trip or summer program, you want to be mindful of their age and everything else that Akila already mentioned. I don't believe I see any other questions in the Q&A.
I will add quickly just to the transportation piece for our older youth, our high schoolers. I know in our county, they do a summer wristband for transportation, and it's like a third of the cost, and it lasts them all summer. And so that's something strategically, if you're using your funding to connect with your local bus transporter, just find out if they do a summer wristband or something similar, because it does save a lot of money and it's good all summer.
Thank you. We do have another question in the chat. Can we use ELL funds to pay for private summer school programs for homeless and foster youth students offered in the community?
Yes, thank you, Alejandra. Again, we would have to get more information on that because you're saying summer school programs, and the ELO program is an expanded learning program. You do have the ability to build on a summer program that an LEA may be hosting to get to the 9 hours. So when you say private summer school, we have to know what that really entails and if you're supplanting, because that's not the intent. But to answer the second part of your question, you absolutely can be using your ELO program funding to cover any type of fees for our homeless and foster youth with partnership programs that you're offering during the 39 school days, just as well as during the school year. But I would double check what the summer school, entails to make sure there's no supplanting in the private program.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any other questions in the chat or the Q&A, but I will give it another minute or two to give people the opportunity to think of the questions that they might want to ask. Someone said, thank you for the answer. You are very welcome. Well, if you're still thinking about potentially asking a question while you do so, please note that we have the evaluation QR code available on the screen, and then we'll also add it to the chat so that you can let us know what your thoughts were with regards to this webinar.
And we will be sharing out again all the slide deck and the video of the recording. And we hope this is just an opportunity to share a little bit about, what's available and get your thought processes going now for, what could be. It might not be something that's actually happening within your community yet, like the WIOA program or some of those other programs, or they might be there and you might not know about them. But again, just wanted to show the expansive offerings that could be available and make sure that we're, as liaisons, always got our thinking caps on how we can do better and how we can grow our capacity to serve these families. And so there are things out there. We just need to make those connections and really make sure we're being intentional about the work that we're doing and who we're working with and how we're connecting folks.
Yes, to that, Denise, we had Leanne give us a little reminder that if you're feeling too overwhelmed at this time, please remember this for next year. So right around what you were just saying, that sometimes this might just be a lot right now, and that's okay. It gives you an opportunity to start thinking about next year and potentially planting those seeds. I'm getting thank you, thank yous. No questions. We'll give it another minute, and if not, we'll say bye-bye and farewell, but you all know where to reach us and how to get a hold of us. If you have a question or you want more information, you want to chat about WIOA, I'm happy to do that. Thank you, everyone, and we'll put the eval one more time in the chat. And I hope you have a beautiful Friday. It is sunny out there, at least where we're at, so enjoy the weather.
And again, we want to thank Akila and Iqbal for joining us. We really appreciate your expertise in this area.
Absolutely. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for allowing us to be a part of this presentation.
Thank you. And yes, all of the resource, the recording, as well as the slides and any other information will be shared with everyone who is participating, as well posted on the Hetac website. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day.
We are at 3 o'clock exactly. It looks like I'll leave this open for one more minute or so. I'll give folks a little more time back in their Friday. I'm sure people have questions they just haven't even thought of yet, but that's okay. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing
Stop recording.
and stop recording. And